Good evening from a village where gossip travels faster than the post. I wonder, from which part of the world are you joining us today? We do love hearing from our listeners near and far. And don't forget to subscribe, so you'll never miss when the next bit of mischief blooms. Early spring had finally arrived in Castley, the kind that flirted with warmth but never committed. The hedgerows were still muddy, the sky sulking in shades of pewter, and Agatha Raisin was bored enough to rearrange her spice rack, which she regarded as a personal tragedy. It was at that moment of despair that salvation fluttered through the letterbox, a glossy leaflet, thick as a bribe and embossed in gold. The grand reopening of the Regency Hotel, Mircester's finest, it declared. There were promises of champagne, celebrity chefs, and an evening of elevated sophistication for select local luminaries. Agatha read it twice, sniffed, then read it again. Select local luminaries. Well, if that didn't mean her, who on earth did it mean? She called Mrs. Bloxby at once. "Come with me," she insisted. "It'll be frightful if I go alone. The village will talk." "The village will talk if you go with me as well," Mrs. Bloxby said mildly. "And besides, I don't think I'm a luminary." "Don't be silly. You're a vicar's wife. That's nearly royalty in Mircester." By the evening of the event, Agatha had decided on her battle armour, a sleek black dress that promised more confidence than she felt, a faux fur wrap, and heels that could double as weapons. She studied herself in the mirror, adjusted a strand of hair and muttered, "Let them try to outshine me." The Regency Hotel rose on the edge of Mircester, like a debutante trying too hard, all gleaming stone, too many lights, and valet parking that seemed slightly embarrassed by its clientele. Inside, the newly refurbished ballroom glittered with gilt mirrors and floral arrangements that looked dangerously expensive. A jazz trio played something that might have been music if it hadn't been so determined to be classy. Agatha swept in, her heels clicking authority. She spotted Mrs. Bloxby near the cloakroom, smiling benignly at the chaos. "Good heavens, Aggie," she whispered. "It's like a cross between a wedding and a tax audit." Agatha laughed, tension easing, until the hostess appeared. Felicia Danby was one of those women who seemed born under flattering lighting. Tall, sleek, and perilously self-possessed, she moved through the crowd like a swan among ducks. Her dress, pale gold, shimmered with every step. "Welcome to the Regency," Felicia trilled. Her gaze landed on Agatha's wrap. "Oh, how charming. Vintage, isn't it?" Agatha's smile froze. "Yes, from Harrods." "Really?" Felicia cooed. "How brave." Mrs. Bloxby murmured, "Shall we find the bar?" before Agatha could commit social homicide. They were soon joined by Lord Pendlethorpe, whose title was older than his sense of humour, and his wife Clarissa, whose beauty was newer than her marriage. The conversation turned to renovation costs, and Clarissa managed to mention the word millions twice in a single breath. Agatha was halfway through a miniature canapé, some tragic cousin of smoked salmon, when a familiar voice drawled behind her. "Darling Aggie, you didn't tell me you'd be here. I might have dressed up." Charles Fraith, immaculate in navy and indolence, was smiling at her over a glass of champagne. "You were not invited," she said crisply. "Neither were you, I suspect," he murmured, "but we improved the scenery." Their exchange was interrupted by the local journalist, Trudy Kemp, snapping photographs as if the fate of civilization depended on capturing every canapé. Nearby, hotel manager Gavin Reeves, trim, polite, and perpetually anxious, supervised staff with the air of a man herding butterflies. Agatha noticed the tension. The waiters moved too briskly. Guests whispered in corners. When she complimented one of the young servers on the champagne, he blinked nervously and muttered, "Careful, miss. She's made enemies in every room tonight." "She?" Agatha repeated. He nodded toward Felicia, who was holding court by the grand staircase, her laughter brittle enough to cut glass. Agatha's curiosity flickered. She leaned closer to Mrs. Bloxby. "She's the sort who'd sell her grandmother for a photo in Country Life." "Oh, Aggie," Mrs. Bloxby said kindly. "Perhaps she's just ambitious." "Ambition's fine," Agatha said. "It's the smirk I can't stand." Later, the celebrity chef emerged to tepid applause, announcing a modern twist on traditional Cotswold fare, which turned out to be beetroot risotto that looked like a culinary emergency. Charles pretended to enjoy it, declaring, "It's not food, it's performance art." Agatha glared. "It's pink rice." By the time dessert, a lemon something that died on the spoon, was served, Agatha's pride was bruised, her feet were throbbing, and her glass had been empty too long. Still, she refused to leave before being noticed. Felicia took the stage again, thanking her guests with the charm of a politician and the warmth of a cash register. As applause scattered like polite raindrops, Agatha turned to go. Charles offered his arm. "Come along, Aggie. Let the poor woman bask in her mediocrity." "She's basking in something, all right," Agatha muttered. "Probably self-tan." They moved through the gilt-edged lobby where photographers were still snapping. Outside, the night smelled of damp stone and overpriced perfume. Cars purred away down the gravel drive. Agatha paused, drawing her wrap closer. Behind her, from the ballroom, came the faint sound of raised voices. She caught the sharp edge of Felicia's tone. "You think you can threaten me? I'll ruin you all before I'm done." Then silence. A door slammed. Charles glanced back, eyebrows lifting. "Well," he murmured, "she certainly knows how to end an evening." Agatha gave a small, satisfied smile. "So do I. Come along, Charles. Let's go home before she starts ruining us." As their car pulled away, the Regency's glittering facade receded into the mist. Inside, the music began again, smooth, practiced, and just a little off-key, like the evening itself. And though Agatha would never admit it, her boredom was cured at last. Something unpleasant was brewing behind those ballroom doors, and she, thank heavens, had a front-row seat waiting. The following morning began with that particular Cotswold sunlight that promised warmth but delivered gossip instead. Carsley, still yawning into its teacups, had already devoured every morsel of scandal from the Regency Hotel's grand reopening. By the time Agatha reached the Mircester cafe to meet Roy Silver, the place was buzzing like a hive that had discovered champagne. Roy was already there, draped in an offensively stylish scarf and looking like London's ambassador to the provinces. "Darling, you made the front page of my breakfast," he said, sliding a copy of the Mircester Gazette across the table. The headline blared, "Local Luminaries Shine at Hotel Relaunch." Below, a photograph captured Felicia Danby mid-laugh, Charles Fraith looking smug, and Agatha, unfortunately, mid-blink. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she muttered. "I look as if I've just swallowed a moth." Roy grinned. "You look enigmatic, darling, mysterious, possibly criminal." The waitress brought 2 full English breakfasts and the sort of smile that suggested she'd been discussing the event since dawn. "Did you hear about the row after everyone left?" she whispered conspiratorially. "My cousin's friend's brother was there. Said Miss Danby and that manager of hers were shouting blue murder behind the ballroom doors." "Was he sober enough to tell the difference?" Agatha asked. The waitress giggled, delivered the toast and drifted away, leaving behind a fresh waft of rumour. Roy poured himself tea with languid precision. "So," he said, "what's your verdict on our golden hostess?" "Felicia Danby," Agatha said, buttering toast as if it were an adversary, "is precisely the sort of woman who uses words like darling and authentic in the same sentence, and I don't trust anyone who can smile that much without cracking." Roy sipped his tea. "I heard she underpaid her staff and sacked the chef for serving truffle oil instead of actual truffles. Brutal." "You heard that in the 5 minutes since you got here?" "Information finds me, sweetie. I'm a magnet for moral collapse." Agatha snorted. Yet, beneath the amusement, her pride still smarted from Felicia's smug little smile the night before. She wasn't used to being outclassed socially, or worse, ignored. "She looked down her nose at me," Agatha said, stabbing her sausage for emphasis, "as if I'd come in wearing a bin liner." "You mean the fur wrap?" "It's faux, Roy." "Oh, darling, no one doubted it." Agatha gave him a glare that could curdle cream. Then, leaning forward, she added, "I'm going to find out what that woman's hiding. Nobody climbs that high without stepping on someone." Roy looked delighted. "You mean to investigate her? Aggie, how thrilling. Shall I bring a camera?" "It's not thrilling. It's professional curiosity," Agatha lied briskly. "My agency's expanding its client hospitality list. I might, purely coincidentally, need to book a weekend at the Regency." "Coincidentally," Roy repeated, nodding with mock solemnity. "Do remind me which of your clients requires 5-star spa access and a death wish." Agatha ignored him, mentally drafting her phone call to the hotel. She would make it sound businesslike, authoritative, as if she were considering offering them lucrative publicity through her PR connections. In truth, She longed to march back into that ballroom and watch Felicia's perfect composure crack. Meanwhile, Bill Wong was suffering through a breakfast of his own, one cooked by his mother, who had been in her element since dawn. "Did you hear, William? That awful woman who runs the hotel shouted at Lord Pendlethorpe. In public." "Mum," Bill sighed, "it's not exactly a crime to shout in Mircester." "It is if you shout at the aristocracy," she said firmly. "Anyway, your Agatha was there, wasn't she? Perhaps she'll get involved." "Let's hope not," Bill muttered into his coffee. Back in the cafe, Roy was checking his phone. Apparently Felicia's got investors crawling out of every corner. Half of them married, most of them deluded. That's one way to fund a refurbishment. "Married men?" Agatha said sharply. "Naturally. It's cheaper than bank loans." Agatha smiled thinly. The notion of Felicia charming half of Mircester's middle-aged businessmen stirred a mean little spark of satisfaction. Sooner or later, women like that overplayed their hand. A small bell tinkled as Mrs. Bloxby entered the cafe, wrapped in a sensible beige coat and serenity. She smiled when she saw them. "I thought I'd find you here," she said. "Half the village claims to have insider knowledge about the Regency." "Oh, come and join us," Agatha said, gesturing to the empty seat. "We were just discussing the virtues of humility, deceit, and overpriced champagne." Mrs. Bloxby sat down, her eyes kind. "Agatha, you're not going to meddle again, are you?" "Meddle? Of course not. I'm simply curious." "Curiosity," Mrs. Bloxby said softly, "is one of your finer qualities, until it lands you in the papers." Roy snorted tea through his nose. "She's right, darling. Remember the church fete and the poisoned quiche?" "That was years ago," Agatha snapped, "and the quiche was shop-bought." They all laughed, but Mrs. Bloxby's expression remained thoughtful. "Envy has a way of dressing itself up as justice," she said gently. "Be careful, Aggie." Agatha waved the warning away, but the words lingered. She didn't want to admit, even to herself, that part of her interest in Felicia came from something more personal than curiosity. There was a sting in being dismissed by someone younger, richer, and perfectly moisturized. As they parted, Agatha stood in the sunlight outside the cafe, watching the dust motes dance like lazy confetti. Somewhere in the back of her mind, the idea of a review visit was already taking shape, sparkling with possibilities. That afternoon, after a brisk walk to clear her thoughts, and to be seen by at least 3 neighbours in her smartest coat, Agatha returned home and dialed the Regency Hotel. Her voice, when the receptionist answered, was all efficiency. "Agatha Raisin, Raisin Promotions. I'd like to discuss potential collaboration. Yes, that's right. I'd like to book a short stay to assess guest experience." The receptionist's tone brightened instantly. "Of course, Mrs. Raisin. In fact, Miss Danby was hoping to contact you herself." Agatha blinked. "Was she?" "Yes. She's planning a special event, a weekend package for select guests. She said it was right up your alley." Agatha's eyebrows rose. "Really? How very thoughtful." Moments later, Felicia's smooth voice came on the line, as silky as the hotel drapes. "Mrs. Raisin, how marvellous of you to call. I was just about to ring you. I'm hosting an exclusive murder mystery weekend next month, something quite theatrical, and I'd love your advice on promotion. It must go perfectly. My reputation depends on it." Agatha's laugh was short, edged with irony. "A murder mystery weekend, you say? How deliciously on brand." "Exactly," Felicia purred. "I knew you'd understand the tone." As she hung up, Agatha stared at the receiver, half amused, half intrigued. The idea of Felicia Danby entrusting her with anything, even fake murder, felt absurd. And yet, some instinct told her this invitation would lead to something far less staged than Felicia imagined. "Her reputation depends on it," Agatha murmured aloud. "Well, we'll see about that." Outside, a gust of wind rattled the window panes, as if the Cotswolds themselves approved of a little mischief to come. Rain came down in curtains thick enough to drown conversation. The Regency Hotel loomed through the downpour like a film set that had forgotten its cue for glamour. Agatha Raisin, sitting beside Charles Frayth's sleek car, watched the windscreen wipers thrash back and forth and muttered, "Perfect weather for a murder." Charles, unbothered, adjusted his cufflinks. "Darling, it's a murder mystery weekend. That's the idea." "You know what I mean," said Agatha. "Rain like this makes people bad-tempered. They'll start killing for real before dessert." By the time they reached the gravel drive, Agatha's hair had developed the kind of volume that no stylist would claim responsibility for. She swept through the glass doors, heels clicking, dripping rain and determination in equal measure. The lobby gleamed, velvet drapes, brass lamps, and a faint smell of over-enthusiasm. Felicia Danby was everywhere, her voice, her perfume, her perfection. She glided toward them in scarlet silk, the sort of dress that announced itself before the wearer did. Mrs. Raisin, how delightful, and Lord Fraith, always an honour, she purred. Charles inclined his head. Charming venue, he said. It's almost as if someone's trying to impress us. Felicia's smile didn't move an inch. I do my best. They were shown to the ballroom, now transformed into a mock Victorian parlour for the evening's entertainment. Guests milled about with name badges that looked faintly embarrassed by their existence. Agatha took mental notes, a retired colonel already complaining about the wine, a romance novelist with hair like spun candy floss, two middle-aged sisters whispering as though plotting a coup, and a quiet accountant couple who clutched each other like survivors of a social shipwreck. You'd think murder could cheer people up, said Charles, surveying the crowd. The event began with Felicia's grand toast. Standing beneath the chandeliers, she sparkled with the self-assurance of someone who believed the universe was her mirror. To our first Regency Mystery Weekend, she declared, raising her glass. May it be elegant, exciting, and profitable. Laughter scattered through the room, brittle as glass. Agatha noticed the hotel manager, Gavin Reeves, lurking near the bar, pale and watchful. The young waiter from the launch party, Liam, she remembered, moved nervously between tables with a tray of champagne. By the staircase, Felicia dabbed coral lipstick while a friend borrowed the tube. Casual, thoughtless sharing. Felicia continued, her voice rising theatrically. This hotel has a glorious past and I promise you, an even brighter future. Some people said I was mad to invest so much. She broke off, swaying slightly. A ripple of amusement ran through the audience, part of the act surely. But then Felicia gasped, clutching her throat. Her glass slipped from her hand and shattered. The laughter turned to shrieks. Agatha was on her feet before anyone else, shoving her way through the startled guests. Felicia was crumpled on the carpet, her perfect dress pooling like spilled wine. Agatha knelt, ignoring Charles's protest. The scent hit her first. Sharp, chemical, unmistakable. Bitter almonds. Cyanide, she breathed. The word spread like lightning. Someone screamed. The colonel barked for order. Charles, remarkably calm, muttered, "Well, that simplifies the evening's theme." "Don't be flippant," Agatha snapped. She looked around the room, faces pale, glasses untouched, shock already curdling into gossip. "Is she?" asked the novelist, her mascara trembling. "Yes," said Agatha grimly. "She's dead." Pandemonium followed. Guests backed away as if death might be contagious. Charles retrieved 2 glasses of champagne from a nearby table and sat down. "I might as well finish mine," he said. "No point letting it go flat." Agatha glared. "Have you no respect?" "On the contrary," he said mildly, to Felicia's final performance. He raised the glass in mock salute. The police arrived with impressive speed, Bill Wong among them, his usual calm tested by the chaos. "Agatha," he sighed, "I should have known you'd be in the middle of this." "Don't start," she said. "I didn't poison anyone. I didn't say you did. You were thinking it. Only statistically." Bill surveyed the scene, his voice low. "We'll need statements. No one leaves until forensics finish." Hours crawled by. Outside, the storm hammered the windows as officers photographed the scene. The coroner's preliminary verdict confirmed what Agatha already knew. Cyanide poisoning. Someone had turned a play-acting evening into the real thing. She retreated with Charles to a corner of the lounge, where a fire pretended to warm anyone. The guests huddled in small clusters, whispering and speculating. "Every single one of them looks guilty," Agatha murmured. "That's because they are," said Charles, "of bad taste at least." Agatha ignored him. Her sharp eyes tracked Gavin Reeves, who stood alone by the doorway, pale and sweating. When she approached, he flinched. "You were managing the event," she said. "Surely you checked what she drank." "Of course," he stammered. "It was the same bottle served to everyone." And yet only Felicia's was fatal. "You think I think," Agatha said, that everyone here had a reason to wish her harm, including you. He opened his mouth, then shut it, gaze sliding away. That was clue enough for her. Not guilt, perhaps, but fear. Nearby, Roy Silver arrived, dripping wet and full of drama, having heard the news from a journalist friend. "Aggie, darling, tell me you didn't plan this for publicity," he wailed. "Go home, Roy." "Home? And miss my big break?" The headline's already writing itself. "Local sleuth in shocking death drama." Agatha groaned. "You're impossible. You adore me. Only when you're far away." Bill reappeared with his notebook. "We've accounted for everyone except one waiter. Young lad, blonde hair, name's Liam Holt. He seems to have disappeared." Agatha exchanged a glance with Charles. "The same one from last week, the one who said she had enemies." "A dramatic coincidence," Charles observed, "or a narrative convenience." Bill shot him a look. "You're not helping, Lord Fraith." The waiter who collapsed was not Liam Holt. The guests were released one by one, escorted to their rooms under police instruction not to leave the hotel. Agatha was among the last to go. As she climbed the grand staircase, the opulent carpets muffled her thoughts, which were already marching ahead of her. Felicia Danby, the woman who demanded perfection, felled by a flaw no one could see coming. In her room, Agatha peeled off her damp coat and stared out at the rain still lashing the windows. The mirror caught her reflection, sharp-eyed, determined, a little older than she liked to admit. Vanity, she thought grimly, could kill in more ways than one. Charles appeared in the doorway, tie loosened, drink in hand. "Well, Aggie, you wanted glamour. Got your wish, didn't you?" She turned sharply. "This isn't a joke. Of course not. It's a tragedy, but a very fashionable one." When he left, Agatha poured herself a brandy from the minibar, sat on the edge of the bed and tried to quiet the hum of questions in her head. Who had slipped the poison into Felicia's drink? Or was it something else? Lipstick, food, perfume? Every possibility glittered with malice. She rose to hang up her coat and noticed the envelope on the floor, pushed halfway under the door. Her name was written in neat black ink. Agatha tore it open. One sentence stared back at her. "You wanted glamour, Mrs. Raisin. Now you've got murder." For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. Then she straightened, chin high. "Well," she muttered, "that's more fan mail than I usually get." But even as she turned out the light, her pulse quickened. The game had changed, and Agatha Raisin was already in play. The next morning dawned with a deceptive gentleness. Weak sunlight spilled over Mircester, making the Regency Hotel look almost innocent. Inside, it smelled of coffee, damp carpet, and anxiety. Agatha Raisin sat in the breakfast room, watching the staff flutter like startled pigeons. Somewhere in the kitchen, crockery clattered and tempers simmered. She had slept little. That note, "You wanted glamour, Mrs. Raisin. Now you've got murder," still sat folded in her handbag, thrumming in her mind like a wasp trapped behind glass. Charles, annoyingly serene, was buttering toast as if breakfast were the cure for homicide. "Bill Wong will be here soon," Agatha said, pouring herself another cup of coffee. "He'll want a statement." Charles looked up. "You mean he'll want to warn you not to interfere?" "Same thing," Agatha said briskly, "but I have no intention of sitting about while some silly girl gets away with murder." "Who said it was a girl?" "It usually is when jealousy's involved," she said. When Bill arrived, he was his usual calm, careful self, though his eyes looked heavy from lack of sleep. "We've accounted for everyone except that young waiter," he said. "Liam Holt. He's done a vanishing act." Agatha's interest sharpened. "Then he's our man." "He's a frightened boy who probably nicked the champagne," Bill replied. "Let the police handle it." Agatha smiled sweetly. "Of course, Bill. You know I'd never meddle." By 10 o'clock she was meddling. She began in the kitchen, where the chef, a large, perspiring man with the look of one who had survived many food critics but not this sort of scrutiny, was barking orders. "I already told the police," he said when Agatha cornered him. "I didn't make her drink. I cooked, I plated, I cursed. That's it." "You're certain?" Agatha asked. "No one else handled the glasses?" "Only the waiters," he said. "Ask them, if you can find them." She made a mental note to do exactly that. But before she could, the kitchen door burst open and in swept Roy Silver, trailing charm and chaos. "Aggie," he cried, "I came as soon as I heard, you poor thing. trapped in a murder investigation without proper media management. Unthinkable. "Roy," she said through clenched teeth, "what are you doing here?" "Managing perception," he said. "These guests are potential witnesses or clients. They'll be giving quotes left and right. Someone must ensure you're the heroic sleuth of the hour, not some meddlesome busybody." "I am the heroic sleuth of the hour," she snapped. Roy fluttered a hand. "Exactly, which is why I'm here to orchestrate that narrative." He winked at a passing guest. "Terribly tragic business, isn't it? I'm Agatha Raisin's publicist." "Yes, that Agatha Raisin." Agatha groaned inwardly. If the murderer didn't strangle Roy, she might. She found Charles lounging in the bar, reading a day-old paper. He looked amused when she recounted Roy's antics. "You do attract theatrical men," he observed. "It's like watching moths to a blowtorch." "Ha ha," she said flatly. "I'm going to find that missing waiter. He's the key." "Care to make it interesting?" Charles asked lazily. "I'll bet you dinner you accused the wrong person first." "Done," she said. "I prefer steak. Medium rare." It took her the rest of the afternoon to coax information from the staff. Most of them were too frightened to talk. The hotel manager, Gavin Reeves, was stiffly polite but unhelpful, claiming everything was under review. Agatha caught the faint smell of his cologne, expensive, spicy, and it nagged at her memory. By late afternoon, the police had scoured most of the premises. Agatha hovered near the service corridor until a constable emerged, looking flustered. "We've found him," he said, "the missing waiter." They led her, uninvited but unstoppable, down a narrow staircase to the cellar. The air was cold and smelled of old wine and fear. Huddled behind a stack of crates sat Liam Holt, pale and shaking. "Please," he stammered, "I didn't do nothing wrong." "That's a double negative," Agatha said automatically, crouching beside him. "Which means you did something. Let's start with that." He looked ready to cry. "I was hiding, all right. I thought they'd blame me. I took some tips. Not much. Just a few pounds. Miss Danby caught me a week ago, said she'd ruin me if I ever showed my face again. When I heard she was dead, I panicked." Agatha studied his face. "Frightened, yes. But guilty? No." "You didn't serve her last drink?" "No, ma'am, I swear. Mr. Reeves did. Said it had to be perfect." That name again. Gavin Reeves. Agatha's mind ticked like a clock. Bill Wong appeared at her shoulder, giving her a look of pure exasperation. "Agatha, what part of 'don't meddle' do you find confusing?" "The don't," she said. "He's innocent, Bill. Look at him." "You're not the jury." "No," she said. "I'm the one who notices things before your jury ever gets the chance." Bill sighed. "Go have a rest. Let us finish this properly." Back in her room, Agatha poured herself a small brandy from the minibar. Rain had begun again, drumming against the window in melancholy rhythm. Charles popped his head in. "Well?" he asked. "The waiter's innocent," she said. "He's just a thief, not a killer." "A thief is a start," Charles said cheerfully. "Perhaps next you'll clear everyone in the hotel, and then you can move on to the village. Don't tempt me." They dined in the hotel restaurant that evening, surrounded by uneasy guests pretending life was normal. Roy had managed to charm his way to the staff table, regaling them with exaggerated tales of Agatha's past glories. "Honestly," she muttered to Charles, "if I hear him mention my fearless investigative spirit once more, I'll strangle him with a napkin." "That would at least narrow my bet," he replied. But even Charles grew quiet when Agatha mentioned Gavin Reeves's name. He was the one who ordered the champagne, wasn't he? Yes, and he was near the bottle when it went missing. "Coincidence," Charles said lightly, though his eyes were thoughtful. "Or envy. People do rash things when they think someone else is winning." Later that night, the hotel was hushed. The rain had stopped, leaving behind the damp hush of polished marble and tired opulence. Agatha wandered the corridor in her dressing gown, unable to sleep. She told herself she was simply stretching her legs, not prowling. The kitchen lights were dim but still on. She pushed the door open quietly and stepped inside. It smelled faintly of detergent and last night's tragedy. Then came the sound, a soft rustle near the wine rack. "Who's there?" she called sharply. A shadow moved. She caught only the outline of a tall figure and a trace of something familiar. Expensive cologne, warm and woody. "Stop!" she shouted, but the figure slipped through the side door and vanished into the corridor. For a moment, she stood there, heart hammering, The scent lingered, luxurious and unmistakable. She'd smelled it earlier that day, in the manager's office. She exhaled slowly. "Gavin Reeves," she whispered. "What are you hiding?" Back in her room, Agatha locked the door and sat on the edge of the bed, the note still in her handbag, the scent still in her head. "Well," she murmured to herself, "if this is envy's taste, it's rather stronger than expected." She turned out the light, already planning her next move, and vowing that by the time this was over, someone at the Regency would be tasting justice instead. The next morning broke in a watery half-light, the kind that made the Cotswolds look as though someone had painted them with leftover tea. Agatha Raisin sat in the hotel dining room, poking suspiciously at her scrambled eggs. Her night had been restless, filled with dreams of footsteps in corridors and the lingering scent of expensive cologne. Charles, already dressed as if for a casual country house weekend rather than a murder scene, read the newspaper with irritating calm. "It says here the police are interviewing staff again," he remarked, turning a page. "They should be interviewing Gavin Reeves," said Agatha. "The man's as smooth as furniture polish and twice as slippery. You're just annoyed he didn't flirt with you." "Don't be ridiculous," she said, though a tiny corner of her pride smarted. After breakfast, Agatha declared her intention to do a little quiet observing. Charles, recognizing that tone, chose not to protest. He'd learned that following Agatha into trouble was safer than letting her go alone. The hotel's greenhouse cafe was a recent addition, all glass and greenery, an oasis for the sort of people who thought cucumber sandwiches counted as self-care. The air inside was heavy with humidity and the faint sweetness of damp soil. Agatha wiped condensation from her brow, muttering, "I feel like a lettuce." Behind the counter stood a young woman with striking auburn hair and an expression that could sour milk. Her name badge read, Nina Drake. She looked up as Agatha approached. "We're closed to the public today," Nina said coolly. "I'm not the public," said Agatha. "I'm a guest, Mrs. Raisin." "Lucky you," Nina said without enthusiasm. "Coffee?" Agatha accepted. Nina poured with unnecessary force, sloshing a bit onto the saucer. Her movements were brisk, defensive, the kind of energy that came from indignation rather than caffeine. "You used to do the flowers here, didn't you?" Agatha ventured. Nina's mouth tightened. "Until Felicia decided the place needed something more modern. I suppose I was too provincial for her tastes." "That seems ungrateful, given your arrangements were lovely." "You saw them?" Nina asked, surprised. "No, but you look like the sort of woman who knows her roses from her weeds." A reluctant smile tugged at Nina's lips. Encouraged, Agatha pressed on. "I imagine Miss Danby was difficult to work for." Difficult? She was poison in perfume. Took what she wanted and smiled while doing it. There it was, the raw edge of something personal. Agatha leaned in. "She took something of yours." Nina's eyes flicked away. "Someone, actually. Gavin Reeves. He was my fiancé before she decided he'd make a better trophy than husband." She laughed shortly. "He went along with it, said Felicia had ambition, I had bills." Agatha hid her satisfaction behind a sip of coffee. "That must have been painful." She made sure it was. Sacked me the week after their engagement. Said my energy was too negative for her aesthetic. The air in the greenhouse grew thicker, the scent of soil and bitterness mingling. Agatha's instincts hummed. Heartbreak, humiliation, and proximity. Classic ingredients for murder. "You must have hated her," Agatha said softly. "I did," Nina admitted, "but not enough to kill her. She was already rotting on the inside." A pause stretched between them. Then Nina added, almost as an afterthought, "She was always dosing herself with those ridiculous vitamin tonics. Little brown bottles in her office. Said they kept her skin luminous. I'd have thought arsenic more likely." Agatha's eyebrows lifted. "Interesting. Are they still there?" "Wouldn't know. Haven't been near the place since she threw me out." Nina looked up sharply. "Why do you ask?" "Professional curiosity," said Agatha, standing. "Thank you for the coffee and the gossip." "It's not gossip if it's true," Nina called after her. Outside, Agatha drew in a breath of cooler air. The sun was making a feeble effort, turning the hotel's glass facade into a pale shimmer. She was about to return to her room when a familiar voice called her name. Mrs. Bloxby approached, holding a small bouquet of daffodils. "I thought the place could use a little brightness," she said. The atmosphere feels heavy, doesn't it? Heavy enough to drown in, Agatha agreed. They sat together on a bench near the fountain, which gurgled with misplaced cheer. "You've been investigating again," Mrs. Bloxby said gently. "Gathering facts," Agatha corrected. "That's hardly a crime." "Not yet," said Mrs. Bloxby. Her eyes were kind but shrewd. "Aggie, are you certain this isn't about pride?" "What's that supposed to mean?" "Sometimes you chase these cases to prove something, not to others, but to yourself." Agatha bristled, then sighed. "Maybe, but I can't help it. There's something about Felicia Danby. She made enemies by breathing." Mrs. Bloxby smiled faintly. "Then perhaps the lesson is not to envy people who look perfect. They rarely are." She stood, handing Agatha the flowers. "Keep these. They'll remind you of something gentler than suspicion." Agatha watched her go, feeling momentarily foolish, then impatient with herself for feeling that way. She wasn't built for gentleness, she was built for action. That evening, over dinner, Agatha shared what she'd learned. "So the glamorous Miss Danby was dosing herself with mystery potions," Charles said. "How terribly modern." "We're going to find them," Agatha said. "We?" "Yes, we. You owe me a steak dinner, remember? Consider this part of the payment." At midnight, the hotel was silent except for the faint hum of the generator. The corridors smelled of polish and secrets. Agatha and Charles slipped down the back staircase like a pair of middle-aged burglars in sensible shoes. Felicia's office was easy to find. The brass nameplate still shone on the door, as though she might stroll in any moment. Charles picked the lock with practiced ease. "You've done this before," Agatha whispered. "Social necessity," he murmured. The office was immaculate, every pen aligned, every file labelled. Only the faint dusting of disuse betrayed its vacancy. Agatha began searching drawers, careful not to leave prints. Charles wandered to the cabinet by the window. "No bottles," he said after a moment, "unless you count the sherry decanter." "There must be something." Agatha rifled through a desk drawer and found a ledger. She flipped through the pages, her pulse quickening. "Look at this. Cash withdrawals. Large ones. Thousands every week. And no record of where it went." "Perhaps she was bribing someone," Charles suggested. "Or blackmailing them," Agatha countered. A noise outside made them freeze, a faint click of footsteps in the corridor. Agatha snapped the ledger shut and stuffed it into her handbag. The door opened. Gavin Reeves stood there, the corridor light haloing his silhouette. His face was perfectly calm, which made it worse. "Mrs. Raisin," he said smoothly. "Lord Fraith, taking an interest in hotel accounts?" "We were," began Charles. "Lost," Agatha cut in quickly. "Terrible sense of direction." "Indeed." Gavin stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. The faint scent of his cologne filled the air, the same one Agatha had caught near the kitchen last night. "Curiosity," he said, his voice low, "can be very unhealthy at the Regency." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Agatha met his gaze, seeing something flicker there, not anger, but fear. He was hiding something, and he knew she knew it. "Then it's lucky I'm in excellent health," she said briskly. "Good night, Mr. Reeves." Outside in the corridor, her pulse thudded. Charles exhaled softly. "Well," he murmured, "you did say you wanted excitement." "Excitement's overrated," Agatha said. "I'd settle for being right." But as they crept back toward their rooms, she couldn't shake the sense that the man's warning had been less of a threat and more of a confession in disguise. She paused by the window, looking down at the darkened gardens where the greenhouse shimmered faintly under moonlight, a hothouse of secrets, still growing. Morning came in a grey drizzle, the kind that couldn't decide whether to rain properly or simply spoil one's mood. Agatha Raisin, fortified by 2 cups of strong coffee, stood by the window of her hotel room, watching droplets crawl lazily down the glass. Somewhere below, a police car purred away from the gravel drive, Bill Wong, no doubt, off to interview someone more cooperative than she. Charles lounged on the bed, reading her copy of Vogue upside down. "You do realize, darling, that Bill doesn't want your help." "He needs my help," said Agatha. "He just hasn't realized it yet. I'll remind him presently." "You'll remind him," Charles said, "and he'll remind you that interfering in a police investigation is illegal." "Only if you're caught," said Agatha. Bill, as it happened, was caught first, by Agatha herself in the lobby, looking rumpled and in no mood for heroics. He sighed the sigh of a man who'd already lost an argument. "All right, Mrs. Raisin," he said. "If I tell you what I know, will you promise not to make things worse?" "I'll try," she said brightly. They settled in the deserted lounge, surrounded by armchairs upholstered in a shade of beige that could depress an optimist. Bill consulted his notes. The champagne came from a boutique supplier in Cirencester. Delivered that morning, Felicia Danby personally placed the order, insisted on a particular vintage for her image. Only she and Gavin Reeves signed the delivery note. "So he handled the bottle," said Agatha. "That's 2 chances to poison her." "Don't start. We've tested the remaining bottles, all clean." "Then someone switched them," Agatha said, "or tampered with the one she drank." Bill pinched the bridge of his nose. "You're determined to involve yourself, aren't you?" "Bill," she said gently, "I was born determined." Meanwhile, Roy Silver had set up what he called his command centre in the tea room, complete with laptop, dictaphone, and a stack of sticky notes shaped like stars. He wore sunglasses indoors. For mystique, he explained, and was busy coaching the hotel staff on how to give media-ready statements. "We need emotional arcs," he declared to a bewildered chambermaid. "You saw tragedy, you felt courage, you now believe in justice. Try again, with more tremble." Agatha arrived mid-performance and looked ready to strangle him. "Roy, this isn't the West End," she snapped. "Not with that attitude it isn't," he said cheerfully. Bill had assigned her a simple task, to speak with the champagne supplier and confirm routine details. Agatha interpreted this as license to interrogate. Charles naturally insisted on accompanying her, claiming he might steady her tone. The supplier's shop, Maison Duval, was a cramped, elegant space lined with dusty bottles and the faint aroma of grapes that had seen better centuries. The proprietor, Monsieur Duval, greeted them with the solemn air of a man who regarded wine as religion. "Ah, the lady of detection," he said, bowing slightly. "You wish to discuss the late Madame Danby's order?" "Yes," Agatha said. "The champagne delivered that morning. You're certain she requested it personally?" "But of course. She telephoned herself, demanded our Cuvée Royale, very expensive. She wanted glamour in a glass." "And who took delivery?" "A man, hotel manager, I believe, and Madame Danby herself signed the receipt. She was, how you say, particular." Agatha thanked him and turned to go, but Duval leaned closer. "Madame, may I say, she did not look well that day. Very pale, hands shaking. I thought perhaps nerves, perhaps regret." Back in the car, Agatha frowned, shaking hands. She'd been poisoned already, or knew something was coming. Charles shrugged. Or perhaps she was having one of those ghastly green detox juices people drink instead of lunch. When they returned, the Regency was swarming with gossip again. Roy intercepted them like a game show host mid-segment. "Aggie, you're just in time. I've secured an exclusive." "You've what?" "Trudy Kemp, the journalist. She's giving me an off-the-record interview." "About what?" "Everything, darling. Murder, intrigue, champagne. Sit down. You'll love this." Trudy, pale and brisk, sat at a corner table with her recorder. She eyed Agatha warily. A faint, expensive perfume clung to her, the same discontinued scent Felicia wore. "I'm not publishing anything yet," she said, "but Felicia told me something before she died. She said she had a story that would put the Regency on the map." "A story?" said Agatha. "An exposé. She wanted headlines. She'd found out that Lord Pendlethorpe was having an affair with his own wife's best friend." Charles, who had drifted over for amusement, raised his brows. "How deliciously old-fashioned," Trudy continued. "She planned to leak it during the murder mystery weekend. Romance, betrayal, real emotion," she said. "Said it would draw publicity from London papers." "So Pendlethorpe had motive," Agatha said. "Public disgrace." "If you ask me," Trudy said dryly, "Clarissa had even more reason. The poor woman looked ready to murder someone at the buffet." By afternoon, Agatha's curiosity had curdled into resolve. She sought out Lord Pendlethorpe, finding him in the lounge pretending to read Country Life. His complexion matched the upholstery. "Lord Pendlethorpe," she said sweetly, "may I have a word?" "If it's about the hotel, I assure you. It's about Felicia Danby," she interrupted, "and your friendship with her." He flushed the colour of undercooked ham. I don't see how that's relevant." "Then it won't bother you to confirm it," she said crisply. After a pause, he sighed. All right, yes, I was indiscreet. Felicia could be very persuasive, but I ended it weeks ago. I had no reason to harm her. And your wife? His eyes darted toward the door. Clarissa knows. She's forgiven me. How generous, Agatha said. A moment later, Lady Pendlethorpe glided in, tall, serene, and radiating the sort of composure that suggested permanent frostbite. Mrs. Raisin, she said coolly, my husband isn't to be interrogated like a criminal. He's not a criminal yet, Agatha murmured. Clarissa's eyes narrowed. You'll find, Mrs. Raisin, that gossip can be more dangerous than poison. When she left, Charles leaned against the mantelpiece, smirking. You do make friends wherever you go. Agatha poured herself a small sherry. She's hiding something. No woman forgives that easily. You'd be surprised, he said. Some prefer vengeance served at room temperature. Roy reappeared, clutching his notepad like a relic. Aggie, I've just had the most fabulous idea. We'll turn your investigation into a digital series. Agatha Raisin, Murder and Manicures. I'll film you interviewing suspects. Roy, said Agatha, if you point a camera at me right now, I'll commit another murder. He retreated, muttering about missed artistic opportunities. Evening settled in with a sigh. Rain pattered softly against the windows, and the hotel's lights reflected off the puddles like nervous jewels. Agatha and Charles dined quietly, both turning over the day's revelations. The champagne was clean, Agatha said, so the poison wasn't in the drink. Then how? Felicia's lipstick, she mused. She was forever reapplying it. Maybe someone doctored that. Charles chuckled. What a ghastly way to go. Death by vanity. It would be poetic, Agatha said, and practical. Lipstick's something only she'd use. No need to spike everyone's glass. Just then, Bill appeared, face serious. He handed her a printed report. Preliminary forensics, ma, he said. Thought you'd want to see it before Roy leaks it on Twitter. Agatha scanned the page. Traces of cyanide compound detected on victims' personal cosmetics, specifically lipstick. Bitter almond signature fits, Bill said. No residue found in glass or bottle. So the killer changed methods, Bill said. Lipstick first, wine next. Her eyes widened. I knew it. The poison was in the lipstick. Which means, Bill said, the killer had close access to her things. Room, handbag, dressing table. Someone she trusted, said Agatha. Someone with reason to want her silenced. Charles drained his wine thoughtfully. Darling, I do admire your instincts, but at this rate, we'll have to arrest the entire guest list. Agatha leaned back, satisfied. Then we'd finally get decent room service. Bill rolled his eyes. Just don't do anything reckless, all right? Reckless, said Agatha innocently. Me? He gave her a look that said always you and left. When he was gone, Agatha stared at the rain-smeared window, her reflection hovering faintly in the glass, proud, tired, intrigued. The glamour she'd once envied in Felicia Danby now seemed hollow, a mask over rot. Lipstick, she murmured, the perfect weapon for a woman who lived for appearances. Charles raised his glass. To appearances, then, and to the delightful mess beneath them. She smiled faintly, and to finding out who decided Felicia didn't deserve hers. Outside, thunder muttered distantly, like applause from a storm that knew a performance worth watching. The morning sun tried its best to cheer up the Cotswolds, but succeeded only in making the drizzle sparkle faintly. Agatha Raisin sat at a small table in the Regency's tea room, staring moodily into her cup. Across from her, Charles Fraith spread clotted cream with the precision of a surgeon who'd given up saving lives for scones. You do realise, he said, that you've spent an hour talking about lipstick. Most men prefer lighter topics over tea. That's because most men don't die from it, said Agatha. Felicia Danby did. Charles gave her a lazy smile. If lipstick was the weapon, then the killer had to be someone very close to her. Women don't usually share their makeup bags. Unless they're very good friends, said Agatha, or very bad ones. She took another bite of scone, glaring at her reflection in the silver teapot. The mirror showed a face she'd rather not admit to vanity about, still handsome, though the years had left faint lines that no miracle cream could erase. You're thinking of Clarissa, said Charles. I'm thinking she wears the same shade Felicia did. Coral sunrise. It's a vulgar colour. Which makes it perfect for you both, he said sweetly. Agatha ignored him. If the poison was on the lipstick, Clarissa might have known it. She could have switched it before Felicia's toast. Possible, said Charles, pouring more tea, but so could that manager of hers. He had access to her suite. Yes, but a man like Gavin Reeves doesn't strike me as the type to know one end of a lipstick from another. Don't underestimate modern men, darling. They're surprisingly adept at self-presentation, especially when guilt is involved. Agatha was halfway through her second cup when Mrs. Blocksby appeared, umbrella in hand, and an expression of mild disapproval that seemed permanently embroidered on her face. "Aggie," she said kindly, shaking off raindrops, "you look as if you're trying to outthink the Almighty again." "Someone has to," said Agatha. "The police haven't a clue, and Charles is only in it for the sandwiches." "I'm here for moral support," said Charles, raising his cup. Mrs. Blocksby smiled and sat down. "I've been to see Nina Drake," she said. Agatha's eyes brightened. "And?" "She started an online business, selling luxury cosmetics. She showed me her stock, all beautifully arranged, the same brand Felicia used. In fact, identical packaging." Agatha blinked. "Identical? That's no coincidence. She could have got the poison through those products, tampered with them, sold them on." "It's possible," said Mrs. Blocksby, but she seemed genuinely proud of her little enterprise, and quite hurt when I mentioned Felicia's name. "Hurt people make excellent suspects," said Agatha. Charles leaned back, amused. "Aggie, you're like a dog with a bone, or in this case, a tube of lip gloss." Mrs. Blocksby looked gently reproachful. "Just be careful not to let envy cloud your judgment. You and Felicia had that in common, you know. Pride, ambition." Agatha frowned. "I'm nothing like her." "No, dear," Mrs. Blocksby said softly. "You're kinder, whether you like it or not." Agatha harumphed but didn't argue. When Mrs. Blocksby left, she turned to Charles. "We're going to Felicia's suite." "Why?" "Because that's where the truth will be, and possibly a decent bottle of perfume." The suite was still sealed by police tape, but Agatha's definition of off-limits had always been flexible. They slipped inside when the corridor was empty. Charles held up a spare police tag. "Borrowed from Bill's team. We'll reseal it when we're done," he said. The room smelled faintly of lilies and furniture polish. Felicia's dressing table was a shrine to self-admiration. Jars, brushes, and lipsticks scattered like relics of glamour. "Look at this," said Agatha, pointing to an empty space among the bottles. "The perfume's missing. There were at least 3 brands she flaunted constantly." Maybe the police took them for testing. Or someone else did, to hide evidence. She knelt beside the bin and rifled through tissues, receipts, and old receipts for spa treatments that cost more than her car. Charles watched with an indulgent expression. "If the murderer doesn't kill you, hygiene will." Agatha ignored him, pulling out a folded paper. "What's this?" She smoothed it open. A receipt from the railway ticket office. One-way fare to London. Name, G. Reeves. Date, the day after Felicia's death. "Well, well," murmured Charles. "Our smooth manager was planning a getaway." "He'd know the police would question him first," said Agatha. "Running away makes him look guiltier. Perhaps he panicked." A sharp click at the door froze them both. "Mrs. Raisin," drawled a voice, "you seem to have mistaken this suite for your own." Clarissa Pendlethorpe stood framed in the doorway like a society portrait, flawless in cream cashmere and cool disdain. She drifted into the room, trailing a faint scent of roses and superiority. "Poor Felicia," she sighed. "So much beauty, so little sense." Her eyes flicked over Agatha's rain-frizzed hair. "I suppose it's dreadful for you, being trapped here amid tragedy." "Yes," said Agatha, "but one makes sacrifices for justice." Clarissa examined the dressing table. "I do miss her terribly. We shared everything, gossip, secrets, even lipstick shades." Agatha's head snapped up. "Lipstick?" "Oh yes, Coral Sunrise. Felicia swore it made her look younger. I rather think she was wrong." She smiled faintly, then turned to leave, her perfume lingering like afterthought. When she'd gone, Charles gave a low whistle. "So," he said, "our grieving widow's wearing the dead woman's lipstick. That's either tasteless or tactical." "Or both," said Agatha. "But she slipped when she said we shared everything. That wasn't grief, it was guilt." They left before the staff could notice them. The corridor was dim and quiet, carpet muffling their footsteps. Agatha's mind buzzed with possibilities. If Clarissa and Felicia had shared cosmetics, it meant opportunity, and perhaps revenge disguised as friendship. Later, back in the tea room, Agatha found herself watching the rain streak down the windows again. Charles had vanished to fetch something, or, more likely, to avoid helping. She was halfway through a third cup of tea when Bill Wong appeared, his expression torn between duty and affection. "I heard from forensics with us," he said. "We've confirmed traces of poison in Felicia's lipstick tube. Same cyanide compound." "Excellent," said Agatha. "Then we just need to find who handled it." "Nina Drake's alibi holds," Bill said. "She was visiting her mother in Bath. The police verified it." Agatha deflated slightly. Blast. She was perfect. Motive, opportunity, the lot. "That's your problem," said Bill dryly. "You fall in love with your suspects." She shot him a glare. "You sound like my therapist." "You don't have one," he said. "Not since the last one suggested knitting." When Bill left, Agatha sat frowning into her tea. The clues weren't adding up, not yet. But something about that perfume, those missing bottles, and Gavin Reeves's train ticket made her skin prickle. Charles returned at last, waving the ticket receipt triumphantly. "You owe me, Aggie. I found something in the bin you missed." "Don't be ridiculous. I found it first." "Yes, but you didn't notice the date stamp at the bottom. It's for the day after Felicia died." She blinked. "So he bought it in advance." "Precisely. Which means he planned to leave before the murder happened." Agatha stared at him, mind racing. So either he knew something was coming, or he arranged for it to happen before he could be blamed. Charles leaned closer, his tone teasing but watchful. "Darling, you do realize we're now poking at a man who smells faintly of money and menace." "Then I'll hold my nose," said Agatha. The rain deepened outside, tapping softly at the windows like a warning. Agatha gathered her coat, glancing once more at the lipstick stain on her teacup. Bright coral, just like Felicia's. "A kiss of poison," she murmured, "and someone's still wearing it." She smiled faintly, a spark of determination lighting behind her eyes. Vanity might have killed Felicia Danby, but Agatha Raisin intended to make it pay for the funeral. It was the kind of morning that made Agatha Raisin wonder why she'd ever left London. The Cotswolds looked postcard perfect beneath a pale sky, but the wind cut through her trench coat like criticism. She stood outside the Regency Hotel's back entrance, tapping her foot and glaring at the service door as though it owed her money. Gavin Reeves had agreed to meet her off the record. When a man insisted on secrecy before breakfast, Agatha had learned it usually meant guilt, romance, or both. She was hoping for guilt. The door creaked open. Gavin stepped out, immaculate as ever, but the strain around his mouth betrayed sleepless nights. His cologne, that same expensive, unsettling scent, hung in the air. "You're early," he said. "I'm nosy," she replied. "You wanted to talk. Let's have it." He gestured her into the staff lounge, a sterile little room that smelled faintly of bleach and betrayal. Agatha sat, crossing her legs in what she hoped was a position of quiet authority. "Felicia was blackmailing me," Gavin said at last. "She'd found out I'd falsified my expense accounts. Hotel renovations, supplier invoices, that sort of thing. I meant to pay it back, but she saw her chance." "And you didn't go to the police because—" He laughed shortly. "Because I like my job, and because she had proof. Screenshots, transfers, the lot." Agatha studied him. He wasn't the trembling sort, too smooth, too proud, but there was real fear beneath his polish. "You were running away," she said. "Yes. I was planning to leave before she could ruin me." He reached into his briefcase, drew out a small USB stick, and slid it across the table. "That's everything I had on her. Hotel records, guest lists, some encrypted files. I was going to delete them, but perhaps you'll find something useful." "Why me?" Agatha asked suspiciously. "Because you're the only one in this circus who seems to care about the truth. And because if I hand it to the police, I'll be charged before I finish explaining." He stood abruptly. "I'm leaving Mircester, Mrs. Raisin. I didn't kill her. Believe that or don't, but keep that safe." And then he was gone, the door swinging in his wake, leaving only that unnervingly expensive cologne behind. Agatha stared at the USB, then muttered, "Why is it always me who gets the homework?" She returned to her room and summoned reinforcements. Within the hour, Charles had produced a bottle of Chardonnay, for clarity, he claimed, and Roy arrived with his laptop and enough enthusiasm to endanger national security. "Right," said Agatha. Let's see what's on this thing before it deletes itself or explodes. Roy plugged it in. The screen flickered with folders, guest records, event bookings, financial statements. One file caught Agatha's eye, Project Regency 2. When she clicked, a password prompt appeared. Encrypted, Roy said cheerfully. Leave it to me. I've watched 3 YouTube tutorials on this exact scenario. That fills me with confidence, muttered Charles. Roy began typing furiously, humming something that sounded suspiciously like a spy theme. 10 minutes later, the laptop emitted a faint beep and went black. Don't touch anything else, Agatha snapped. Chain of custody still matters. What did you do? Agatha demanded. I might have borrowed the police Wi-Fi, Roy confessed, for speed. Roy, that's evidence tampering. Only a little bit. Before Agatha could throttle him, the screen flickered back to life. Rows of numbers appeared, then words. Investors, contract notes, holdings, buyer interest. Charles leaned in. So our dear Felicia was up to something bigger than local scandal. Selling the hotel chain, Agatha murmured, probably using forged documents just like we suspected. The more they read, the clearer it became. Felicia had inflated valuations, faked investor lists, and planned to sell a luxury portfolio that barely existed. If exposed, she'd have taken down half of Mircester's social climbers with her. So everyone stood to lose, Agatha said softly. Money, reputation, even marriages. No wonder she ended up dead, Charles said. She'd built herself a bonfire and struck the match. Roy frowned. You know what's strange? These guest records. Look, one entry's been edited after the murder. Someone logged in 2 days ago under Felicia's password. Who? Asked Agatha. Can't tell. The login's masked through a proxy. But whoever it was, they wanted to delete certain names, mostly wealthy locals, maybe to hide their involvement. Agatha sat back. The pieces were starting to align, if only slightly. Someone had killed Felicia not just to stop exposure, but to take control of whatever Project Regency 2 was meant to become. Charles poured more wine. You realize this puts you in danger, darling. Yes, but it also makes me right, said Agatha, and that's far more satisfying. Still, she knew he was right. The thought of Gavin's cologne made her uneasy. He'd fled, yes, but perhaps not far enough. That afternoon, Agatha sought out Mrs. Bloxby. If anyone could make sense of corporate fraud and moral confusion in the same breath, it was the vicar's wife. They sat in Mrs. Bloxby's warm, tidy kitchen while the kettle sighed. The vicar's wife peered at the screen with mild curiosity. You see here, Aggie, she said, tapping the laptop. These entries marked PR2. They're not just contracts. They're drafts for shell companies. Felicia was pretending to own properties she didn't, selling them to investors who didn't exist. Agatha blinked. Good heavens, she was committing fraud against people who were already fraudulent. Poetic, isn't it? Mrs. Bloxby said gently. But it also means she made many enemies, people desperate enough to keep their own secrets buried. Agatha sighed. And now we have a whole murder built on dishonesty, vanity, and greed, the holy trinity of Mircester. Mrs. Bloxby poured tea. Be careful, Aggie. You're playing detective in a game where the rules keep changing. Agatha smiled faintly. Yes, but at least I know the players cheat. When she returned to the Regency that evening, Roy was waiting in the lobby looking sheepish. I may have caused a small misunderstanding, he said. Define small. Bill Wong called. Apparently the police server crashed while I was testing bandwidth. He says if I touch another laptop, he'll have me arrested for cyber manslaughter. Good, said Agatha. It'll keep you out of my kitchen. Roy grinned. Still, I did manage to save the files before it crashed. I copied them to a backup drive. See? I'm not entirely useless. That's debatable, said Agatha, though her tone softened. She pocketed the drive and, with a rare sense of weariness, decided to call it a night. The case had twisted itself into new shapes. Felicia's fraud, Gavin's blackmail, and a growing list of people with motives thick as treacle. Hours had passed since Gavin's confession. If he'd left, he hadn't gone far. By the time she reached her cottage in Carsley, the sky had deepened into indigo. She stepped out of the car, grateful for the quiet hum of crickets and the familiar scent of roses climbing her gate. Except the gate stood open. Agatha frowned. She distinctly remembered closing it that morning. She moved slowly, scanning the shadows. The garden path was empty. the night too still. And then she caught it, that same faint trace of cologne drifting among the roses. Expensive, masculine, unnervingly close. Her heart thudded. Gavin's cologne. "If you're out there," she said into the dark, "you'd better have brought biscuits." No answer, only the wind shifting through the hedges. Agatha closed the gate carefully, double-latched it, and went inside. She poured herself a large glass of wine and stared out the window until the scent faded, or until she convinced herself it had. She told herself she wasn't frightened, merely irritated. But as she locked every door and window, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone had just walked through her life again, unseen and uninvited, and might do so once more before the end. The night descended over Mircester with theatrical intent, mist rolling across the hotel car park like dry ice. The Regency's facade gleamed under its floodlights, grand and hollow, a stage awaiting its final act. Inside, the chandeliers shimmered, tables glowed under white linen, and Agatha Raisin, wrapped in a midnight blue gown that cost too much and revealed too much, surveyed her handiwork with a calculating eye. "You look like you've just murdered someone yourself," said Charles Fraith, emerging from behind her with a glass of whiskey. "If I have to listen to another round of polite denial tonight," Agatha said, "I might." She had invited them all, every remaining suspect. Clarissa and Lord Pendlethorpe, glamorous and brittle, Nina Drake looking mutinous in borrowed pearls, Gavin Reeves, immaculate but tense, Trudy Kemp, the journalist, serene as a swan with secrets, and Roy Silver, who'd insisted on attending for moral support and social media reach. "We're calling it," Roy had declared earlier, "an evening of elegance. Felicia Danby remembered. Sounds classy, sounds lucrative." "Sounds ghastly," Agatha had replied, but she'd allowed him to send out the invitations anyway, hoping the pretext would lure the guilty into her net. Now, as the waiter poured champagne and nervous laughter drifted through the room, Agatha raised her glass. "To Felicia," she said. "May her business acumen inspire us, and her manners not haunt us." A polite ripple of laughter followed, too quick, too thin. Across the table, Clarissa Pendlethorpe's smile was frosted glass. Nina Drake toyed with her fork as if considering weaponizing it. Charles leaned close. "Subtle as ever, darling." "Wait," Agatha whispered back. "Give it time. They'll bite." The first course, something with smoked duck and pretension, was served. Agatha had planned the evening like a general plotting war. Between courses, she would needle, nudge, and provoke. Her aim was simple: unsettle the killer until vanity or fear cracked the facade. "So tragic, this whole business," she began conversationally. "Felicia seemed so vigorous." "Vigorous?" Roy repeated. "Aggie, she was practically radioactive." Nina snorted into her napkin. "That's one word for it." Gavin's tone was smooth as glass. "Let's remember she built this place from nothing. She deserved some respect." "Respect is earned," Clarissa said icily, "not purchased along with new curtains and younger men." A murmur ran around the table. Lord Pendlethorpe shifted uncomfortably. Agatha seized the moment. "Speaking of purchases," she said sweetly, "I hear Felicia had a rather large appetite for investment, and not just in property." Clarissa's eyes narrowed. "What are you implying?" "Nothing at all," said Agatha, "only that forged contracts can be so embarrassing when they surface." The silence that followed was sharp enough to slice bread. Gavin's jaw tightened. Nina looked up quickly, then down again. Trudy, sitting at the far end, regarded Agatha with mild amusement, the corner of her mouth twitching, as though watching a play she already knew the ending to. "You have a very dangerous imagination, Mrs. Raisin," Gavin said. "I prefer curious," said Agatha. "Curiosity's far safer than poison, wouldn't you say?" Roy, oblivious to the rising tension, had his phone out under the table. "Just recording for posterity," he whispered. "The lighting's divine." "Roy, put that away," hissed Agatha. "Oh, relax. I'm only streaming to my private followers. They adore a good dinner party drama." The main course arrived. Slow-cooked lamb for some, nerves on toast for everyone else. Conversation became brittle. Clarissa turned her cool attention to Nina. "You've done rather well for yourself since Felicia's death. Selling her brand online, wasn't it?" "That's my business," said Nina sharply. "Indeed. Some might call it grave robbing." Nina shot up from her chair. "You pompous cow." "Ladies," Charles said mildly, You'll frighten the waiter." "Let them," muttered Roy, filming again. Lord Pendlethorpe, red and sweating, turned on Gavin. "She told me the investments were sound, every penny backed by contracts. Now you say they're forged." "I'm saying nothing of the kind," Gavin replied coolly. "You signed them." "I signed what she gave me." Trudy's voice cut through the din. "And we're all pretending we didn't know she was blackmailing half the county." The room fell still again, the words echoing off the polished walls. Agatha's heart quickened. She'd suspected as much, but to hear it said aloud was something else. "Blackmail?" Charles said, eyes bright with amusement. "How very retro." "She had dirt on everyone," Trudy said, swirling her wine. "Letters, photos, the works. She planned to turn it into a tell-all feature for my paper. I refused to print it. I value my job and my skin." Agatha watched her closely. Trudy's calm was unsettling, her poise too perfect. Yet something in her tone, a trace of satisfaction, made Agatha's instincts prickle. "So that's why you hated her," Agatha said softly. "I didn't hate her," said Trudy. "I pitied her. She couldn't tell the difference between publicity and love." Before Agatha could reply, Roy's phone emitted a cheerful ping. "Oh, bother," he said. "Comments are coming in faster than I can moderate. Someone's already asking if the murderer's been unmasked." "If you don't put that infernal thing away," Agatha snapped, "I'll unmask you as the first casualty." The waiter, pale and perspiring, reappeared with dessert and a fresh bottle of wine. Agatha noticed the tremor in his hands as he poured. She caught Charles's eye, a silent warning. Something in the air had shifted. Gavin was arguing with Clarissa now, voices rising. Pendlethorpe was dabbing at his brow. Nina's eyes darted nervously from one to the other. Roy, absorbed in his followers, was narrating sotto voce. "The atmosphere, darlings, is electric. One could die for this sort of tension." "Oh, shut up, Roy," Agatha hissed. She reached for her wineglass, but Charles's hand darted out first. With deliberate nonchalance, he stopped her hand. "To our hostess, may she never organize another dinner," he said, sliding his glass toward her while keeping hers out of reach. "Just humour me," he murmured, not drinking from either. Moments earlier, the waiter had topped up Agatha's glass, taken a quick quality check sip, and set it back on the tray. Before Agatha could ask why, the waiter, the same pale young man, staggered, clutched his throat, and collapsed with a crash that silenced the room. For a second, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. Clarissa screamed. Pendlethorpe knocked over his chair. Roy dropped his phone with a clatter. Agatha knelt beside the fallen waiter. She didn't need to smell the bitter almonds to know. Her pulse hammered. The poison had been meant for her. Bill Wong burst through the door moments later, flanked by 2 officers. "What in God's name?" he began, taking in the scene. "Someone just tried to murder me," said Agatha. "Again." Charles crouched beside her, his face pale but composed. "It was the wine. I switched glasses." "You what?" Bill demanded. "Instinct," Charles said lightly, "or self-preservation." Bill straightened, surveying the room. "No one leaves? Not until we've sorted this." "Oh, I think we're rather past sorting," said Agatha, standing. She brushed imaginary dust from her dress, then faced the room like a prosecuting barrister. "Let's review, shall we? Felicia Danby was poisoned through her lipstick, a weapon requiring intimacy. She was blackmailing several of you. We'll skip the delicate details for now. Her financial empire was built on forged contracts, and Gavin here was conveniently planning a one-way trip to London the next day." Gavin's mouth tightened. "I didn't kill her." "Perhaps not," said Agatha, "but someone here killed her to stop the truth coming out, and just tried again to silence me." Clarissa rose to her feet. "How dare you accuse us? This is obscene." "Obscene," Agatha said, "is serving poison with pudding." Bill tried to intervene, but Agatha's momentum was unstoppable. She moved from face to face, her voice gaining force. The lipstick was planted by someone who understood image, someone who lived and breathed scandal. The contracts were the hook, but the blackmail was the line, and now we've all taken the bait. Her gaze landed on Trudy Kemp. The journalist sat perfectly still, her fingers folded neatly on the tablecloth. Only her perfume betrayed her, a faint, expensive fragrance that tickled Agatha's memory. Felicia's perfume, discontinued months ago. "You," Agatha said softly, "you're wearing Felicia's scent." All eyes turned to Trudy. She smiled faintly. "Oh, this? A gift? I suppose it is a bit of a collector's item now." "So are murderers," Agatha said. Trudy met her gaze, cool and unflinching. "Careful, Mrs. Raisin. Accusations can be libelous." "Only if they're false," said Agatha. Bill stepped forward. "Enough. Everyone stay seated. We'll sort this formally." Bill stepped forward. "Enough. Everyone stay seated. We'll sort this formally." By 3 a.m., statements finished, the restriction eased. Guests could move through public rooms at dawn. Agatha sank into her chair, suddenly aware of her racing heart. The adrenaline drained, leaving a tremor of fear and something else, exhilaration. Charles poured her a small whiskey. "Well done, darling," he said softly. "You've turned dinner into a full-scale inquest." "Better than letting the killer choose the menu," she murmured. Roy, retrieving his phone, announced, "The viewers are loving this. Agatha Raisin's death dinner is trending." Bill shot him a murderous glare. "If you don't turn that off—" "I was just about to," said Roy hastily. "After all, we don't want spoilers." The paramedics wheeled the waiter out. The guests huddled in uneasy silence, and somewhere outside, rain began again, polite English rain, as if trying to wash away the spectacle. Agatha looked down at her untouched glass of wine. The surface shimmered faintly under the chandelier light, beautiful, treacherous, deceptive, much like Felicia herself. "You know," she said quietly, "I'm starting to think glamour really is fatal." Charles raised his glass in a rueful toast. "And you, my dear Aggie, are the most dangerously glamorous of them all." She smiled, a small, tired smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The killer was close now. She could feel it. And before this play was over, someone would take their final bow. The Regency Hotel looked almost innocent in the soft dawn light, as though its marble columns and manicured lawns had never seen deceit, poison, or Agatha Raisin in full pursuit of justice. Inside, the ballroom lay silent, the aftermath of the previous night's chaos still visible in half-cleared tables and an overturned chair by the bar. Agatha stood in the doorway, feeling that familiar tug between triumph and exhaustion. Bill Wong had spent the night interviewing witnesses, Charles had insisted she get some rest, and Roy had gone live on social media, claiming to be processing the trauma of investigative fame. Typical. Now, alone, Agatha followed her instincts, or perhaps her curiosity's addiction to drama. The scent of lilies and furniture polish mingled with something sharper, perfume. The same perfume she'd noticed on Trudy Kemp the night before. Trudy was standing near the stage, framed by dusty sunlight filtering through the tall windows. She looked collected, almost peaceful, as if waiting for applause that never came. "Mrs. Raisin," she said calmly, turning, "you're up early, or perhaps you never went to bed." "Sleep's overrated," said Agatha. "So is murder, come to that." Trudy's lips curved faintly. "Murder? Such an ugly word. Felicia Danby was the author of her own misfortune." "You poisoned her lipstick," Agatha said. "That's not misfortune, that's homicide with a cosmetic touch." Trudy walked slowly towards the long mirrors, her reflection doubling in the glass. "You're clever, I'll give you that, but I didn't mean to kill her." Agatha's heartbeat quickened. "Go on." Trudy rested her palms on the table. "She humiliated me, Mrs. Raisin. Took my expose idea, the one about corrupt investors, and passed it off as hers. She told my editor I was unstable, jealous, unprofessional. I lost my position, my credibility, everything." Agatha folded her arms. "So, you decided to teach her a lesson?" "A lesson, yes, not an execution." Trudy's voice trembled faintly now. "I bought a small bottle of diluted cyanide, trace amounts, enough to cause panic, nausea, nothing fatal. I thought she'd make a spectacle of herself, that she'd finally see how fragile power really is." "But you overdid it," said Agatha softly. Trudy nodded, eyes glistening. "She kept reapplying it. She always did. Vanity killed her as surely as I did." For a moment, Agatha felt the oddest flicker of pity. She'd seen that same pride in herself, the desperate need to matter, to be seen, even when it hurt. "You could have come clean," Agatha said. "And what then? Another headline? Fallen journalist turns killer?" Trudy's smile returned, brittle now. "The public loves hypocrisy, so long as it's someone else's." A sound behind them, the quiet click of a shoe. Bill Wong stepped forward, steady and expressionless. Charles followed, holding a coffee cup like it was part of his moral support. "Trudy Kemp," said Bill, "I'm arresting you for the murder of Felicia Danby. You don't have to say anything." "I already have," said Trudy. She straightened, smoothing her blouse, and extended her wrists with eerie grace. "You know, Mrs. Raisin, I admired you once. Sharp, unapologetic, relentless. But you're not so different from her. You thrive on attention, too." Agatha felt the words strike deeper than she cared to admit. For a moment she had no reply. As Bill led Trudy away, the silence in the ballroom thickened. Charles approached, handing Agatha the coffee. "Well," he said gently, "you've done it again. Solved the unsolvable, annoyed the police, nearly died. You're a one-woman circus." Agatha took the coffee, ignoring the tremor in her hands. "She wasn't wrong, you know." "About what?" "About me. I started this to prove I was better than Felicia, cleverer, stronger. Not for justice, just vanity wrapped up as bravery." Charles smiled. "My dear Aggie, vanity drives most of civilization. You simply make it look entertaining." She snorted softly, but the humor didn't quite reach her eyes. The ballroom felt emptier without the danger. By mid-morning, the hotel hummed with reporters and cleaners. Bill reappeared with an exhausted look that only Agatha found reassuring. "You'd think this place was Buckingham Palace," he muttered. "Press everywhere." "Oh, come now," said Charles. "They're just here for the local heroine." Bill shot Agatha a weary smile. "I'll never hear the end of it from headquarters. But credit where it's due. You were right about the lipstick. And the killer." "Of course I was," said Agatha briskly, though a blush rose under her foundation. When he'd gone, she turned to Charles. "You know, sometimes I think Bill enjoys telling me off. Makes him feel noble." "Everyone needs a hobby," said Charles. "Yours just happens to involve crime scenes." That night, back in Carsley, the village looked comfortingly ordinary. Postboxes red and unrepentant, dogs walking their owners, gossip already shifting to new subjects. Agatha sank into her armchair with a sigh that managed to be both weary and self-satisfied. Roy appeared unannounced, waving a folded newspaper. "Aggie, you're famous again." "Again?" she said. "I've only just recovered from the last time." He spread the paper across her lap. The headline blared, "Local Sleuth Saves Regency Hotel from Ruin." Beneath it, a photograph of Agatha looking unexpectedly glamorous. Chin lifted, eyes bright, half defiant. "Oh, that's rather good," she admitted. "Keep reading," Roy said, grinning. The article described her intuition and unyielding investigative flair, quoting Bill Wong, who claimed she'd aided police efforts with characteristic boldness. Agatha glowed until she reached the final paragraph. According to lead investigator Roy Silver, the breakthrough came from his digital analysis of hotel data. Agatha froze. "Lead investigator?" She circled lead investigator and scribbled publicist over it. Roy coughed delicately. "Creative license." "It sounds better for the narrative." "It's theft, you little parasite. Publicity is a team sport, darling." She snatched the paper, glaring. "I ought to throttle you." "But you won't," said Roy serenely, helping himself to a biscuit, "because deep down you adore the spotlight, and me." Agatha's glare softened despite herself. "Sometimes I wonder why I keep you around." "Because I make your victories look even more dramatic." Mrs. Bloxby arrived just then, carrying a small bouquet from her garden. "Congratulations, Aggie," she said gently. "You've done something good again, even if it came wrapped in trouble." "Thank you," said Agatha, her tone half proud, half distracted. When the others left, she lingered by the window, the paper still on her lap. Outside, twilight deepened over Carsley's rooftops. The air smelled faintly of rain and roses, her roses, undisturbed now. She smiled faintly, thinking of Trudy Kemp's last words. Perhaps she did chase attention. Perhaps she loved the thrill too much. But she also loved the moment justice landed, however messy the path to it. She poured herself a modest glass of wine, her idea of restraint, and raised it to the quiet evening. "To Felicia," she murmured. "To vanity, justice, and whatever poor fool crosses my path next." Charles's voice drifted from the open doorway. "And to the most glamorous bloodhound in England." Agatha laughed. "You make that sound like an insult." "Oh, it is," he said cheerfully. But as he joined her, she allowed herself a smile, small, private, and very nearly content. Somewhere between the satisfaction of solving a murder and the vanity of seeing her name in print, Agatha Raisin had found her peculiar sort of happiness. Outside, the church bells chimed softly, marking another evening in the village that would gossip about her for weeks. And Agatha, ever the unlikely heroine, basked in it, half amused, half proud, and entirely herself. Spring arrived in Carsley the way it always did, shyly, as if afraid to wake the hedgerows. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and daffodils, and Agatha Raisin, local heroine and reluctant celebrity, sat at her kitchen table surrounded by newspapers bearing her own face. "Local sleuth triumphs," one headline proclaimed. Another, less kind, read, "Middle-aged Miss Marple strikes again." Agatha folded that one briskly. "Middle-aged indeed," she muttered. "Some people have no sense of proportion." Fame, she decided, was rather like a soufflé. Delightful at first, but it collapsed if you stared at it too long. A gentle knock interrupted her musings. Mrs. Blocksby entered with her usual quiet grace, balancing a plate of lemon drizzle cake that glistened like good intentions. "I thought you might like a bit of sweetness after all that excitement," she said, setting it down. "If sweetness could mend my reputation, I'd have it for breakfast," said Agatha. "Your reputation seems perfectly intact," Mrs. Blocksby said mildly. "You've saved a hotel, unmasked a murderer, and graced the Mircester Chronicle's front page. Not bad for a week's work." Agatha sniffed. "Yes, but they didn't get my age right. 49, honestly. I haven't been 49 in, well, never mind." Mrs. Blocksby smiled, cutting the cake with surgical precision. Perhaps they thought it polite to underestimate. Agatha took a slice, already feeling better. The lemon icing was soothing, the way Mrs. Blocksby herself always was. Sweet, with a hidden tang of wisdom. "Bill phoned this morning," Mrs. Blocksby added. "Trudy's confessed everything. She'll serve a light sentence, and she's already writing a book called Beauty and Betrayal, My Story." Agatha rolled her eyes. Typical. Commit a crime, get a publishing deal. "At least justice was done," said Mrs. Blocksby, "and Felicia's hotel is recovering. Apparently they're rebranding as a wellness retreat." "Ha, I can just see it. Murder-free mindfulness at the Regency." Mrs. Blocksby chuckled softly. "You do have a way with slogans." When she'd gone, Agatha wandered into her garden, where the tulips stood in obedient rows. She'd been neglecting them, as she often did after a case. Solving murders gave her purpose, but it also left an ache she couldn't quite name. Success, she thought, was hollow without someone to admire it. The villagers had been warm enough. Congratulatory smiles in the post office, a free scone from Mrs. Mason at the bakery. Yet Agatha felt a certain emptiness under the praise. It wasn't justice she'd been chasing, not really. It was recognition. And now that she had it, it already felt like yesterday's gossip. Her phone rang. "Aggie," said Charles Fraith's amused drawl. "You've gone to ground. I was beginning to worry you'd been seduced by celebrity." "Hardly. I'm just enjoying the quiet." "Then allow me to ruin it. Fancy a weekend in Bath? I've secured a suite with a view and a wine list that might restore your faith in civilization." Agatha hesitated, the corner of her mouth twitching. "I suppose you imagine I'll drop everything and go fluttering after you." "Well, of course. You always do in the end." She was about to retort when she realized annoyingly that he was probably right. "I'll think about it," she said briskly. "Good. Bring something scandalous to wear." He rang off, leaving her half indignant, half amused. It was infuriating how easily Charles could make her feel both seen and ridiculous. The afternoon drifted by in a haze of domestic normality, the kettle humming, the faint chatter of birds, and the steady tick of the clock that reminded her life was, for the moment, murder-free. By dusk, she was back in her sitting room, feet up, newspaper on her lap again. Her photo smiled out at her. Slightly too wide a smile, she thought, though her hair looked marvellous. "Local sleuth triumphs," she read aloud, then sighed. "If only they'd got my age right." As if in reply, the doorbell rang. Agatha shuffled to the front door, expecting Mrs. Blocksby's Tupperware. Instead, the postman stood there, holding a glossy white envelope with looping gold script. "Evening, Mrs. Raisin," he said. "Special invitation for you. Looks fancy." She thanked him and shut the door, curiosity piqued. The envelope smelled faintly of lavender and ambition. She slit it open with a nail file. Inside was a card embossed with gilt lettering. The grand spring gala at the Regency Spa Champagne, live orchestra, and notable guests from across the Cotswolds. Agatha groaned aloud. Oh, not again. Yet even as she said it, her pulse quickened. The words notable guests had a delicious ring. She imagined the champagne, the soft lighting, the possibility, set to however faint, of something thrilling. Well, she muttered, setting the card on the mantelpiece, one must support local business. She glanced once more at the newspaper headline beaming from the table. Local sleuth triumphs. Agatha straightened her shoulders. Provided, she added, with a wry smile, nobody dies this time. Outside, the first stars pricked through the twilight, and in the distance Carsley's church bell chimed softly, as though agreeing, but not entirely convinced.